about what happened in the past, but there's new svaris more and more people, and to make it to get married at a younger age, an older age. My opinion is obviously clear to get married at a younger age. Halavai the Ashkenazim should get married at the gil hachirach. Rach means young, and Achi means the youngest. Halavai the Ashkenazim should also get married at the youngest age. Okay, David Rav Chisda, the Gemara in Kiddushin, where the Gemara says over there that a person get married at a younger age. The younger you get married, the less issues you have, the more successful you are in life. V'chulu v'chulu. I have a cousin of mine that likes to say that we know that one of the greatest chassidim ever, that he was even such a great chassid, he was called a Hafer Rebbe. His name was Reb Hillel Parisher. Reb Hillel Parisher got married at the age of 12. So my cousin says, why was Reb Hillel Parisher such a great chassid? Because he got married at the age of 12. Mamela, he had no issues. So Mamela, it's a very big irah, it's very important. Today, unfortunately, it's going crazy, getting married, talking about it. No, this is the Rebbe's kav, it's the Rebbe's shita, and it's kedai, and that's the right thing to do. Every person has to have, you have to have your own nasei l'charav, you have to ask him protius. There are situations where a person in his own personal avodah, there are also letters of the Rebbe to tell parents and tell individual people to wait a little bit, but the general kav, the oifen kloli, the Rebbe says, the oifen kloli, definitely the right thing is to get married as early as possible. There's no point in pushing it off, especially today's day and age. Who wrote the Medrash Rabbah? Medrash Rabbah was put together by Tanoim and Amiroim. There isn't a clarity exactly who was the Mechaber. It was not Rabbah himself, that's clear. Rabbah was an Amoira, and this is all Tanoim. Some say that the word Rabbah comes from Harbe, that there's a lot of, it's the biggest Medrash, like Godel. Some say that the first opinion over there is the first name mentioned is Rabbah. That's why it's called Rabbah. He's also mentioned over there, but B'cholifin, it was put together by Tanoim and Amiroim. How much of questions here, one after the other. When Mashiach comes, will pigs become kosher, and why? That's a whole long arichas. We have an animal shir on that. Maybe we'll give it one day. But the answer is that's a machlekes. Some say yes, some say no. And the ones that say yes is because that pigs will change losid lav and it'll become mutter. When Mashiach comes, will we know how to shech giraffes? This question is based on a common mistake that people think that the reason why we don't eat giraffes today is because you don't know how to shech them. That's not precise. The issue with giraffes is that they're an endangered species, and the pita of chulu, they're not one's going to let us shech them. The nation of that people say that it's not such good meat. Bechlal, those that do eat it, and maybe that's the reason. So we know how to shech it now as well, and we don't shech it for other reasons. Well, any other animals become kosher by Mashiach? Doesn't say that, so I never heard of such a thing, so l'chayra not. Will there be non-kosher animals by Mashiach? Pashtus yeah, v'gor zeivim keves, v'arya kabakar yechal devin, it says in the psukim that there are going to be the wolves and the lamb, v'chulu v'chulu, so you can have them there. Will we have any purposes for animals by Mashiach besides for karbonis? Are there any purposes for animals now besides for karbonis? What's the purpose of animals now? Today we don't use our donkeys for schlepping stuff. It's karbonis. Karbonis is cholent and food v'chulu. So for those kind of stuff, yeah. But for the sam, was there a purpose of lions and tigers today? What's the purpose for that? It doesn't say. So l'chayra, just like there's a reason for it now, the same reason would apply. And the pashas are going to be there like the psukim say. If there is a cooked food, bread, cookie, fish, which you know is 100% kosher, kosher ingredients, you know how it's made and you know it's clean like expensive organic foods, does it need a hechsher or be pas yisrael in the case of bread? A very, very general question. If you know 100% that the ingredients are kosher, so they are, and if it was cooked by a goy, then it depends. There are certain foods that need to be bishul, and certain foods don't need to be bishul yisrael. That's now we're learning about pas, but there's another booklet we have on bishul. It's a whole summer to spend on it to know all the details back and forth. In short, there's two basic rules, and the rules are: if it's oil al shulchan malachim, if it's a food fit for a king, it has to be cooked by a Jew, or if it's a kind of food which cannot be eaten raw, then in that case, if it's cooked by a goy, it cannot be in that case, it's not. It has to be bishul yisrael. So, if it's a food which does not require bishul yisrael, does not require pas yisrael, then yes, it does not need a hechsher. However, that's only when you know 100% sure. Today, especially the people working in kashrus, they're always coming out and telling us that even though you think this item doesn't need a hechsher, but I'm telling you it does need a hechsher. I know, for example, about cashew nuts. Remember, a number of years ago, some people always said cashew nuts are not an issue, even though they're roasted. It's only roasted with cashews, nothing else is there. It's not ilah shulchan malachim, so it's not a problem of bishul. And then one of the people in kasher stuff would travel to one of these countries where they make the cashew nuts, and he said that in the same ovens where they roast the cashews, they also roast non-kosher foods. So just because you assume that there's nothing in the ingredients, you can't assume it on your own. You have to ask other people. There are certain foods which are pretty much accepted. For example, brown rice, plain brown rice that's not cooked. I was told it doesn't need any kind of hechsher. There's also other beans, different kinds of things like that. I was told by a famous guy in Crown Heights, he says, this item is noki michshash hechsher. No problem. But there can't be chesed that there's a hechsher that was put on it. So there are foods that are like that. The water, but that is also accepted. But since today there's so much in the food industry, there's so many different techniques and things that the way they do, and a lot of times the government does not require for them to report it. So therefore, in the past, people did look at labels and buy according to that, but today, I pretty much no one trusts that anymore, unless you know for a fact, after doing a beater on something, that you know this item is not an issue, and you can buy it even without an extra. According to the Torah, are all the kushim meshuba to us from the Gzeira of Noach or not? If yeah, what's the level of their shibut? How much do they have to serve us? So the pastor's not. The Torah says that cursed that Cham's children were cursed, that his Knan, they will become servants, or become slaves, but it doesn't mean automatically that every goy, every descendant of Cham, of Knan is a slave. It means that their tribes and their nations ended up being sold into slavery more, and when a Yid buys them, they become a slave. But Stamazoi, just like any goy in the world, we know that everything in the world was created to serve Yidden, including Goyim as well, so everything was made to serve us, but not specifically that we have any kind of balabatishkeit in that kind of sense of ownership, like an Odin owns an Eved, that lechayda we don't have unless you bought an Eved as an Eved Knani. But otherwise, there's no such concept as just because he's a Goy, he's an Eidah Kolocham, that's why he's automatically our Eved. Can you marry a Goy once you are already unable to have children? For example, second marriage. No connection. Even though a big part of the issur of getting married to a Goy is having children, but the marriage with the Goy, being with the Goy itself, is an issur for Bifnei Atzmai, and it's a lois yischatin bum, not to marry a Goy, regardless if you're going to have children with them or not.
We should have an issue of chassans too.
What is the line between ishtadlus and bitochin? At what point do you go and stop and say the rest is up to Hashem? This is a very, very heavy question, and I think it has to be. There's only an individual. It's called mikra legufa. Each case for itself. If someone's looking for a parnasa, so at what point does he say I did enough? I'm relying on Hashem. I think l'chayda it can only be answered in an individual kind of way. There's a ma'aseh with the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov once was walking down the street, and he walked by a house, and he knocked on the window, and he continued walking. So the person there knocked at the window. By the time he got to the door to look, he saw the Baal Shem Tov down the road. So he went running after the Baal Shem Tov. Rebbe, what's going on? So the Baal Shem Tov said he needed money for something. So the chassid said, here, but why did you continue walking? So the Baal Shem Tov said, I had to make a ishtadlus to make money. So I knocked on your window, that was my ishtadlus, and now I went back to I was doing my things what I have to take care of. So that's the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov was such a level that he went and knocked on the door. That was enough for him to go, that was the ishtadlus that was necessary for him. He didn't have to do more than that. If a person today is going to tell his family, tell his wife and children, I'm just going to sit and learn the whole day, and I'm knocking windows, and that's going to be my parnasa once a day on a window, I don't think that can be that's the ideal. There are stories of people that they had to attack a tremendous level of bitachon. The famous story everybody knows with the guy that with his horse and wagon that so someone stole his wagon, and then a ganav stole it, and the ganav put a whole chest of money on it, and then the ganav ended up falling under the sand or whatever it was. It's a Machanayim book, Rabbi Hill also, everyone knows the story. And afterwards, the wagon came back to his house, and that story begins also. That he had bitachon, he said, I'm not going to go to work anymore, I'm relying on the Eibishter. So if the bitachon is so strong, if you're on the level of Baal Shem Tov, which everyone has to say, so if you're on that level, then that gets enough to have, the minimal level of ishtadlus should be enough. And most of us are not on that level, so mainly you have to know how much you have to ask a Rav. You have to ask a mashpia. That's what I would say. An individual level, each time ask your mashpia. about what level when do I stop and trust Hashem? That's stopping. At the same time, the ishtadlus, you trust Hashem at the same time. Is there a correct way to shecht a human so that his meat will be kosher for consumption? For example, being stuck on an island. I don't want to be stuck on an island with you. No, there's no connection. The question can be about chazer just the same. It's a joke about, I forget what the joke was, but a guy came to Israel, he wanted to shecht the chazer. Because he has nothing else to eat, he only has a chazer, he wants to shecht it. There's no such thing as shechting anything which if the meat is not kosher, then the shechting doesn't make it kosher, and there's no doesn't make it any better. The question would be a lot worse, different question. If a person's in a situation where Rahman al-Islam and another human passed away, the guy's dead anyway. So now the person that's alive now is starving. There's nothing what to eat. Is he allowed to cannibalize that the leftover? That would be if anything, a valid question. But we're coming up to Eicha soon, and then Eicha says, Nashim Rahmaniyos, what's the lashon? Bishlo Yaldeya. And it says that even women that had Rahmanis, they cooked their own children. So I once saw a nice pshat over there. It says that the hands of the Nashim Rahmaniyos, these same hands that were so compassionate, they cooked their own children and ate them. Rahman al-Islam. But the pshat that I read once is that Nashim Rahmaniyos, they cooked their own hands to feed their children. They cut off their hands and put it in a soup, and they cooked it up and they fed their children. It also sounds gross, but it's a bit more edel.
Yeah, they have a story of there was this one woman.
Kind of like